My name is Evelyn Marek, and at 45, I've learned that silence, used at the right moment, is louder than any speech. I've spent most of my life in operations holding things together that other people didn't even realize were breaking. Today, I'm about to let something fall apart. The company's all-hands meeting starts at 9 sharp. More than 100 small faces fill the grid on my laptop, their smiles rehearsed. Charleston light leaks through my blinds, striping the wall behind me. I keep my camera off and my microphone muted, fingers resting on the folded letter beside my keyboard. At 9:14, Blake Harland begins his speech. His voice is all charm and buzzwords, the kind that sound impressive until you realize they mean nothing. "We're streamlining," he says, "outsourcing non-core functions for greater scalability. My project, my team. 5 years of work reduced to a bullet point." I unmute my microphone. "Blake, you might want to revisit Section A, soft click." The icon turns red. I've been muted for half a second. I freeze. Then the old calm returns, the kind that comes from surviving a dozen storms no one else even saw. I switch on my camera. The gallery view stutters as new faces look up, confused. I lift my right hand, holding my company badge. In my left, a single page, my resignation letter, signed and dated. Behind me, my virtual background fades in white letters against black. Effective 9:01 a.m. The silence is instant and electric. Blake blinks, his smile folding. Someone's mug clatters against a desk. The general counsel leans forward, eyes narrowing at the screen. From an unseen square, a man's voice, older, strained, cuts through the void. The founder. Tell me she didn't just quit. My cursor hovers over leave meeting. The clock on my monitor flips to 9:01. Click. The grid of faces vanishes. The screen goes dark except for my own reflection steady. Breathing. Finally free. Outside, gulls wheel above the harbor, their cries thin against the hum of Charleston traffic. I close the laptop, set the badge beside the letter, and let the morning air in. 3 weeks ago, I'd still believed loyalty meant safety. Charleston still slept when I logged in, the harbor outside my window the color of pewter. The air carried salt and the faint hiss of the tide, a rhythm steadier than any meeting calendar. At 5:30 a.m., I was already on my second mug of black coffee, headset balanced against my neck, listening to another escalation call that had started somewhere in Frankfurt and ended, as usual, at my doorstep. 5 years. That's how long I'd been the silent hinge keeping our biggest logistics client from falling apart. They trusted me because I never panicked, never blamed, never let a single clause slip unnoticed. The numbers proved it: $15 million in annual revenue. 0 missed deadlines. Stability doesn't make headlines, but it makes payroll. I'd built a life around that stability. Morning jogs along East Bay Street, a quiet apartment filled with post-it notes and sea breeze, a rhythm that let me believe I was safe. Lately, though, the air in the office had changed. The founder had stepped back. A new generation was redefining efficiency. They spoke of speed, disruption, automation, beautiful words that broke things if you looked too closely. Emails arrived with subject lines like transformation sprint and next-gen workflow alignment. None of them mentioned people. When meetings doubled and context vanished, I started hearing the same phrase whispered in corridors. "We're going lean." The first time I saw the draft proposal, my stomach knotted. Offshore task forces, compressed review cycles. The client would never agree. I flagged the risk, attached the relevant clause, and hit send. No reply. It was a subtle shift, one calendar invite removed here. One thread I was no longer copied on there. But I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before in smaller ways. Years ago, when women who built the foundation were politely erased once the paint dried. That morning, as dawn peeled over the harbor, I sat back and watched the water catch fire with light. Somewhere in the building above me, someone was already preparing a slide deck about my obsolete processes. I just didn't know his name yet. He arrived on a Monday, The kind of man who thought charisma could replace competence. Blake Harland, 32, fresh from a startup that had folded before its first audit, now wore a vice president title like it came with divine right. I met him in the hallway outside the operations floor. He was balancing an oat milk latte in one hand and a tablet in the other, smiling like he already owned the building. "You must be Evelyn," he said, offering a handshake too quick to mean anything. "I've heard you're basically the spine of this account. Can't wait to modernize what you've built." Modernize? The word hung in the air, polished and harmless until you saw what it did to budgets and people. By the end of that week, he'd renamed our internal Slack channels to Velocity Hub and Ops Reimagined. He replaced our shared folders with a shiny offshore workflow tool that none of us had tested. The first outage happened within 48 hours. Documents disappeared mid-transfer. Version histories reset. My team stared at their screens, waiting for instructions. I fixed it myself, quietly. Patching access routes and restoring files before the client noticed. Blake called it teething pains. I called it negligence. He didn't read reports, only slide decks colored boxes and arrows pointing toward words like synergy and scalability. He used acronyms no one recognized, then congratulated himself for leading the future. When I tried to flag compliance issues, he smiled as if I were quaint, a relic of slower times. At first, I said nothing. Let him rearrange the furniture, rename the functions, reinvent the wheel in lowercase letters and bullet points. My job was to keep the machine running, and sometimes the best way to teach a man like that was to let him pull his own plug. Still, there was something unsettling about his ease, the way his last name opened doors before he even knocked. When I heard someone mention that his father played golf with the founder every Friday, the pattern snapped into focus. This wasn't leadership. It was inheritance dressed as innovation. 2 nights later, I stayed long after the lights on the 5th floor had gone out. The office had that hollow stillness of a place that only breathes when people are watching. My screen was the only light left, reflected in the glass walls that now felt like a cage. Blake had circulated another optimization memo that afternoon: charts, projections, a plan to outsource half of my team to Manila within the quarter. I needed proof it would backfire. I opened the client archive, scrolling through folders with names like amendments and continuity addendums. The files dated back to the pandemic years, when the world was duct-taped together and everyone had been improvising survival. I remembered those days too well. Tanya Rios, the client's head of risk, running daily calls from her kitchen table, both of us trying to hold the account steady while the globe unraveled. And then I saw it executed: Contract 2020 Rev C PDF. The document loaded slowly, line by line, until my cursor stopped on Section 6.4b, Continuity of Named Personnel. If Evelyn Marek, the named escalation officer, voluntarily resigns from employment, the client reserves the right to terminate this agreement immediately and without penalty. For a long moment, I didn't move. My name sat there in 12-point font, plain and absolute. I'd helped draft that clause myself, at Tanya's insistence. "You're our stability," she'd said back then. "If you go, the deal goes." I hadn't thought about it in years. Now I understood what it meant. All the meetings Blake excluded me from, the system migrations he pushed through without review, none of it mattered. The structure was built on my presence. If I walked, the contract fell with me. The hum of the building deepened, air vents sighing like something exhaling. I scrolled again, rereading the words until they felt like a heartbeat. Then I saved a fresh copy to my drive, time-stamped, unedited. I closed my laptop gently, as if not to wake a sleeping animal, and leaned back in my chair. Somewhere below, the night guard's footsteps echoed across the marble floor. He locked up. I smiled. So would I. The quarterly all-hands always felt like theater slides rehearsed. Smiles pre-approved. Applause cued on cue. That morning, I joined the call from my office, the harbor glowing behind me like glass. My report was third on the agenda: client health metrics, delivery performance, escalation response time. The numbers were good, better than good. I'd kept the account running at 98% compliance despite the chaos Blake called innovation. When my name flashed on the screen, I unmuted. Good morning, everyone. I'll start with Q2 stability indicators. Blake's voice cut through mine. Actually, Evelyn, he said, his tone coated in something sweet and sharp. Let me jump in for context. He leaned closer to his camera, flashing that easy grin he practiced like a signature. As part of our new efficiency strategy, we've decided to transition her project to our offshore team next quarter. He paused, smiling wider, the kind of pause that invites applause. A few executives nodded politely. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. My project, I asked, before realizing my microphone light had gone red. Muted. My own frozen face stared back at me from the screen, mouth half open. I moved the cursor to unmute, but the option was disabled. Blake kept talking words like streamline and modernize floating over my silence. The general counsel, Tom, appeared in the corner grid, expression tightening. His eyes flicked toward the founder's square, camera off, initials only. I sat perfectly still. Years of composure compressed into one heartbeat. My hand found the edge of my desk, steady as I clicked Leave Presentation Mode. The room around me went so quiet I could hear the buzz of the ceiling lights. I didn't try to interrupt again. There was no point fighting a man who thought muting someone made him powerful. When the meeting ended, I closed the laptop with surgical precision. For the first time in my career, I didn't feel defeated. I felt something colder, cleaner, a plan hardening behind my ribs like glass cooling into shape. 2 days after the meeting, HR called me in. Their email was dressed in soft words, touch base, alignment, transition support, the kind of language that tries to sound neutral while gutting your work. I walked into the glass conference room at 9 sharp, coffee in hand, pulse steady. Dana, the HR manager, sat waiting with a folder she didn't look comfortable holding. Evelyn, she began, smiling too tightly. I just wanted to clarify some next steps after the reorganization. This isn't personal, it's part of a larger vision. I'd heard it before. Every corporate coup started with not personal. She talked for 15 minutes about continuity, handoff documents, maintaining morale. I listened, nodding in the right places, watching her reflection in the glass wall behind her. She looked like someone reading a script when she finally paused. I said, "So I'm staying on through the transition period?" "Yes," she replied quickly, relief flickering across her face. "We'd appreciate your cooperation until the offshore team is fully trained." I smiled. Of course. Back at my desk, I opened the internal legal repository, our so-called CYA drive. The cursor blinked against the blank search bar. I typed Executed Contract, 2020, Rev C PDF. The document appeared instantly. I uploaded my unaltered copy. Attached metadata original version. Executed April 2020. Maintains Section 6.4b, Continuity Clause. The system confirmed the timestamp. Immutable. Permanent. Then I sat back, letting the air conditioning hum through the quiet office. The world outside the windows glowed with late afternoon light, the harbor water rippling gold. I cleaned my workspace, methodically stacked files, wiped the desk, slid my planner into my bag. My mug, the chipped one that said Queen of Ops, I left in the corner, a tiny monument to the years I'd held the line. The next all hands was set for Friday morning, 1 week away. The invitation sat at the top of my inbox, waiting. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it simply Preparation. Inside it, I placed 3 things: my resignation letter, the contract clause, and the calm certainty that I wouldn't need to raise my voice. By midweek, the rumor had escaped containment. Someone in legal had stumbled across the uploaded file, and within a day, quiet whispers began threading through the office. Clause 6.4b, 3 numbers, and a letter that suddenly carried weight. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Chat windows went still, like everyone had collectively decided to hold their breath. I kept working as if nothing had changed, reviewed deliverables, approved invoices, answered client questions. My name still appeared on every escalation ticket, and every one of those tickets reminded me how deeply I was woven into the fabric Blake was trying to unravel. Tom, the general counsel, passed me in the hallway one afternoon. His glance lingered for half a beat too long, sharp and knowing. But he said nothing. Neither did I. Some truths didn't need witnesses, they only needed time. That night, I wrote my resignation letter by hand, not because it was required, but because something about ink on paper felt irreversible. The strokes were steady, the words spare, no anger, no justification, just closure. On the kitchen counter, I placed my badge beside it. The silver numbers glinted under the warm light. Then I opened my laptop and created a new virtual background white text against black, clean and final. Effective 9:01 a.m. I tested it once, watching the stark letters hover behind my reflection. They looked almost elegant, like an epitaph carved into calm. Thursday night slipped into Friday before I realized I hadn't slept. The harbor outside my window shimmered with early light. The same water that had reflected countless mornings of obligation now looked strangely still, like it understood what was about to end. At 8:57, I logged into the company Zoom link. 100 faces appeared, cameras blinking awake. I stayed muted, motionless. The clock in the corner of my screen advanced 8:58, 8:59. My cursor hovered over the camera button. Then, without a word, I turned it on. The all-hands began at 9 on the dot. Blake appeared first, perfect suit, perfect grin, pretending not to notice the tension simmering through every pixel on the screen. "Morning, team," he said brightly. "We've made great strides in optimizing our delivery pipelines. This quarter marks the beginning of a leaner, smarter era." I watched him from my small square in the gallery view. Camera off, microphone muted. He clicked to the next slide, a scatterplot of meaningless arrows and buzzwords: scalability, agility, vision. His voice droned over them like background noise in a waiting room. Then, at 9:043, I clicked Start Video. The grid rearranged itself. A few faces blinked in confusion. Blake hesitated mid-sentence. I didn't speak. In my right hand, I held my company badge. In my left, the handwritten resignation letter. Behind me, the black background glowed with white text. Effective 9:01 a.m. The room, the virtual one, fell silent. Even the usual Slack pings seemed to stop. Blake froze, that confident smirk faltering for the first time since he'd arrived. Somewhere on the second row, Tom's square flickered. He leaned closer to the camera, eyes narrowing, lips moving around a single sentence meant for someone off-screen. "Tell me she didn't just quit." I didn't wait to hear the response. The digital clock in the corner flipped to 9:01. I pressed Leave Meeting. The world went still for a heartbeat. Then everything began to move at once. Slack exploded dozens of messages, half disbelief, half panic. By mid-afternoon, legal had confirmed the clause was valid. At 6:12 p.m., the client's notice arrived. Activation of Section 6.4b. Immediate contract termination. No penalties. $15 million disappeared in one sentence. By the next morning, the story had leaked. Someone screenshotted my background. They muted the named person trended across industry boards before noon. Investors called emergency sessions. Blake's name appeared in message chains with phrases like liability exposure and executive review. And somewhere in the chaos, my old office mug still sat on my empty desk, the words Queen of Ops catching the light like a quiet punchline. By Monday morning, the company looked like a building after an earthquake still standing, but nothing aligned where it used to be. The pending merger, once flaunted as inevitable, was suddenly under reconsideration. Board members demanded emergency sessions. Half the leadership team went silent on internal channels, while the rest filled inboxes with half-hearted reassurances that no one believed. I watched it unfold from the distance of my small apartment. the harbor fog curling past the windows like smoke from a slow fire. News traveled fast in corporate circles. The leaked screenshot of my resignation background had become a shorthand for implosion. Effective 9:01 a.m. 3 words that turned into a headline, then a case study. By noon, legal issued a formal statement to the board. Section 6.4b was valid, binding, and repeatedly ignored. The language was clinical, but the subtext sharp. This wasn't an accident. It was arrogance. Within hours, Blake's access badge was deactivated. A message circulated internally. Vice President of Operations, suspended pending review. His name vanished from the org chart before the end of the day. The founder released a memo calling the loss an unfortunate alignment failure. Investors called it negligence. Employees called it what it was, karma, itemized. I received 31 emails in less than 2 days' job offers, consulting invitations, a few awkward congratulations from people who had once avoided eye contact in the break room. I answered none of them. Late one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Tom, the general counsel. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent too many hours in boardrooms cleaning up other people's choices. "I just wanted to say," he said quietly, "you reminded them that contracts have consequences." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of distant traffic filled the space between our words. Then he added, "I hope you find somewhere that deserves you." When the call ended, I stared at the still screen for a long time. The sun was dipping low over the water, staining everything gold, and for the first time in years, there was no meeting to join. 3 weeks later, the rhythm of my days had changed. No dashboards, no red alert emails at dawn. I started consulting for a small logistics firm housed in a weathered brick building by the Charleston waterfront. The floors creaked when you walked, and the conference table was an old shipping crate polished smooth with age. There was no mission statement painted on the wall, no slogans about velocity, just people who listened before they spoke. My first morning there, the air smelled of sea salt and coffee. The harbor outside shimmered with early sunlight, gulls sweeping low over the masts. I unpacked slowly a notebook, a pen, a small vase I'd carried from my apartment. The quiet was different here, not the anxious silence of corporate politics, but the kind that left room to breathe. Around mid-morning, the receptionist knocked gently on my open door. "These came for you," she said, placing a bouquet of deep crimson roses on the desk. The scent filled the room, rich and steady. A small folded card was tucked beneath the ribbon. "If you ever come back, we'll do it your way." The handwriting was neat, deliberate toms. I traced the words once, then set the note beside a single sheet I'd kept all this time. Section 6.4b, continuity of named personnel. The paper had softened at the edges, the ink faintly smudged, but the line with my name remained clear. I slipped both into the top drawer of my desk and closed it gently. Outside, a tugboat horn echoed across the bay, long and low, a sound that carried farther than it seemed possible. I looked out the window at the sunlight scattering on the water, my reflection barely visible in the glass. The world beyond the office shimmered, calm and open. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding something together. I just felt present, steady, unmuted, and exactly where I was meant to be.